class.
All right, everybody. Well, good morning, good afternoon, depending upon where you're tuning in from. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Sonny Brent, and I work with Singer Sewing Machines, and we're going to have a really fun class today because today we're talking about FreeMotion sewing. And the cool thing about FreeMotion sewing is truly can be done on almost any machine. So I'm going to give you some tips and hints on how to get set up. We're going to start with thread painting, and if all goes well, we'll even go into some stippling and other quilting techniques. So, but all done with FreeMotion. So I do want to also thank Bethany is here in the studio with me today, and Amy and Vanessa are helping. So if you see something in the chat coming from those three, they are working with us here at Singer. So excited again that you guys are here. So I'm going to just jump right in. And when I talk about FreeMotion sewing, basically, if you think about your sewing machine, you have your feed dogs, feed teeth, whatever you want to call them, and it pulls the fabric through when you're sewing. Well, guess what? We're not going to use that today. You are the one in control. And that's what's so exciting and so much fun about FreeMotion. And I just want to show you what we're going to start with. I'm going to show you a little example. So Bethany, if you'll flip over to the other camera for me, if you guys can see this, this is a little piece that I did, and I'm turning it. Can you see how that's changing in color? We're going to talk about how this works and how we did this, but I want to share with you before I go any further, my inspiration. This was actually, it's a little bit harder to see, a little bit different color, but this was actually done by hand. And for me, hand is not a good word. I don't like hand, but with FreeMotion, you can create stuff like this. This was one of my grandmother's little table runners that she did by hand, but I am so fine to do, pardon me, to do this like this right with the machine. So that's what we're going to start with, is talk about thread painting. Now, with thread painting, I want to share a couple other things, because if you'll look behind me here, and I'm going to zoom in for a minute, but that dress is all done FreeMotion. Again, no embroidery machine, no anything like that. So I'm just going to come up a little bit here. And hopefully, I'm going to zoom way in. Can you all see that? That's pretty darn cool. At least I think that's really cool. And I'm just going to move this just a little bit more if I can. Come up here. What that is, and I don't know if you think this is as cool as I do, please put it in the chat. That is actually a white fabric with like black tulle put on the top, but all that stitching around, that was all done FreeMotion. And so you're going to see that. And oh my gosh, I just think it is fabulous. And I'm going to come down. And if you can look on those, you can even see those little thread hairs coming off. It is really, really cool. So we're going to talk about this here now. And so I'm going to go ahead and come back in. There are a couple things, everyone, that you need to do with your sewing machine for FreeMotion. So if you have a pen and paper, now's the time to write these things down. Okay, so you're going to want to write these things down. The first thing is you are going to want to drop your feed dogs or feed teeth or cover them. That is step one. So some machines have a little switch, right? So I'm just going to, and Bethany, you can stay on the wide view. And in the back here of my Singer Heavy Duty, which is actually really great, there's a little switch, and you're going to hear it. Maybe you'll hear it. Did you kind of hear a little click? That was actually taking the feed dogs, the feed teeth, and dropping them. So that's your first step. Every machine, you either need to cover your feed dogs. Some of them have feed dog covers, and others you drop it. So that is step one. So super important you realize that. Okay, so that's step one. The second thing is, and Bethany, if I can get you to come to the other channel or other, yep, this little guy right here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to change our presser foot, everyone. So I'm going to even move this a little bit closer in like that, and then zoom in just a little bit. And to change our presser feet, I said you need to. Here's the thing, you can do free motion without a darning foot. We have two different darning feet. Amy, this is one of the links that I gave you is for this particular darning foot. This is a great darning foot. I'm going to show you how you put that on. Our Singer machines also, you can use this darning foot. There are a couple different ones. The darning foot, what it does is it allows the fabric to move and it holds the fabric down. If you don't have a darning foot or if you don't have one yet, it's time to get it because otherwise you can break a needle if you do not have a foot. So that is number 2 is we're going to put on this darning foot. So I'm just going to try to keep my hands and my hair out of the way. And just unscrew this. And gosh, I put it on way too tight this morning when I put it back on after practicing. Now, with this, everyone, and I did kind of want to share this with you. This is a little tip that I think is really important, but I know my hand was all in the way. I'm sorry about that. Is I'm just going to take this presser foot off. Okay, so I'm going to take my presser foot off.
And the ankle, right?
But notice that I have the presser foot still connected to the ankle. That's my little tip for you because sometimes you can lose your ankle real easy. So if I keep my presser foot and ankle together, it's a lot easier to find. So I always like to do that. All right, so I always like to do that. Okay, I got my threads caught kind of back there. With a darning foot, okay, so with a darning foot like this, there is, and I'm going to bring this up a little bit close. Can you see there's a little pin? It looks like a little pin. That piece has to go above the needle bar. So that has to go above the needle bar. And then this piece down here goes on to where our presser foot is actually attached. So let's zoom in a little bit more. And I'm going to turn just a little bit here as well. All right. So here we go, everyone. So remember what I said, this is going to go on where the presser foot attaches. This goes above the needle. But I'm going to give you again a little trick and tip for this because it's kind of hard to get this on and get this above the needle bar. What I want you to do is I want you to look at what I'm doing. I'm just putting my needle down. And you couldn't see that. I'm sorry. See how I put that needle right down in the foot? Now, it is super easy. Let me come around this way. To go ahead and put that little bar above the needle bar here. It's super easy to do that. And I'm just going to slide my presser foot up. So the bar is above the needle bar. I do have that down and that kind of holds it in place. And now I'm just going to screw this in.
Oh, you're fine.
I was worried that I was closing, not able to let you guys see anything, but you can see pretty good right there. So any questions about that yet? Step 1 is, oh, I'm terrible. Step 1, I was going to say, okay, everybody, what was step 1? Drop your feed dogs or drop your feed teeth. Step 2 is use I'm going to tighten it just a little bit more, just to make sure, is to go ahead and get your darning foot on. I tell you, I'm struggling with this today. Just to make sure that that's nice and tight. So there we go. All right. So now I'm going to bring my needle back up. So y'all can see that pretty well, I think, right there. All right. And then let's get that real close because our next step is actually coming up here. So Once we have these done, I already had my machine threaded, which is fine. I'm going to use some decorative threads on top. And I'm going to use a basic lightweight thread underneath. Okay, so it's a little bit lighter weight because you're going to have thicknesses. If you think about this, and I'll bring this little guy back, and I know you can see there's lots of thread here, right? So you can see there's lots of thread all over these things. So you want to use a lighter weight bobbin thread underneath. So those are pretty key. Okay, now let me come up and I want to share with you a couple other things on our heavy duty here. I'm going to choose, you have the option to choose a straight stitch or to choose a zigzag stitch. With thread painting, you're almost always going to use a zigzag stitch. So again, whatever machine you have, zigzag stitch, you know what that is. You can mess around with that, so I chose that. But here's the other thing. I'm going to take my stitch width down just a little bit. That's how far the zigzag goes back and forth. But my stitch length doesn't matter. Because remember, one of the first things we said was, guess what? You're the one that is in control of what you're doing. So that is really kind of important that you realize that. All right, so I've got my zigzag stitch. I've got my presser or my darning foot on, and I've got my feed dogs dropped. And I know I've said that 3 times, but this is again, just the way you want to set up. The last thing we're going to do is now we're going to work with our fabric. Okay, so when I come back here, you will want for FreeMotion Sewing some sort of hoop. If you have a machine that has embroidery, you can use an embroidery hoop. What I'm going to do is I'm using a regular hand embroidery hoop today. So a hand embroidery hoop. The important thing with this is I'm going to zoom back in here just a little bit. But the important thing is with this is you have to be able to get that hoop underneath your presser foot. Can you see that? I'm using the extra high lift on my heavy duty to get that under. If your hoop won't go under the presser foot, guess what? You got to get another hoop. So it's super important that you have a hoop that is actually going to fit under. Okay, so hope that makes sense to you all. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So at this point, let's see if I can get down here with our hoop. I want you guys to put in the chat here. How many of you are hand embroiderers? How many of you love to do that? Just put that in the chat so we know. Because with a hoop like this, for hand embroiderers, you know that you want your fabric to be on the top. But for machine embroidery, for what we're doing here, we're actually doing it just the opposite. The fabric needs to be on the bed of the machine. So we are going to take that outer hoop. And what you're going to do is you're going to place that on your table. So you're going to place your outer hoop on the table. Put this down. And what I did is I am using a tearaway. So this is a little tearaway stabilizer. I know it's tearaway because I can tear it easily. So I'm using a tearaway stabilizer. And again, Amy, those are a couple things that I had in the chat. So, or I gave you links for. So there are a couple different stabilizers. Michael's carries several. I just gave you links for what I think were really nice. And then I'm going to put my fabric on top. Okay, so this is the different part because this is what now I'm putting the inner hoop into the outer hoop. So my fabric is down at the bottom. So my fabric is down at the bottom, and then everyone, all I'm going to do is I'm going to really tighten this pretty darn tight. Okay, so I'm just going to tighten that. You want your fabric. I know it's a little hard to see. I chose white so we could see what we were doing a little bit easier as far as the threads go. But basically, I'm also gonna just see how I'm just kind of pulling a little bit of the fabric. That way, it's gonna be nice and taut inside. Okay, so nice and taut there. Right. So what I want to do is I'm going to go back to at my original little picture here. Throw that down. I did. Like my mother. What I wanted to show you is I want to kind of make this look similar to the hand look, right? So I want to make this similar to the hand look. So it's important. And what I did is I just kind of looked at it, and can you all see how I drew my flower? So I'm actually going to follow kind of like coloring. This is the cool part, is it's like coloring. So we're going to color in the lines. But will you notice here, everyone? See how I've got, it almost looks like little dashes. Those are actually called horizon lines. What that means is I want the stitches to follow that line. And then when I get to the middle, I want it to go up and down this way. And then when I get to this side, I want it to go this way. That's what makes this so darn cool. And that when I do that, it changes the color. All right. So any questions about that as I bring my machine forward? You guys getting all this? This is so cool. I'm so excited to share this. My mother, this more than you guys ever needed to know, but my mom made me when I was in 4-H, when I was about 8 years old, I had to do my own free motion embroidery. And it is a skill that I love. And it is something that I think is something that you just build on.
Celine said she's ready to see it in action.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
No, they're excited. They're excited.
Sorry for all the setup, but it is important if you get it set up properly. Here we go. Then you're going to have success.
And what gives it that kind of two-tone look is the thread type, the rayon thread that we're using, right?
Part of that is rayon thread. I am using a rayon thread in the top. It is a shiny thread, so that is actually pretty cool. Cotton threads are beautiful. They are not quite as shiny, but they look lovely when you're doing this. All right. So cotton threads, rayon threads, silk threads, if you want to go that far, there's so many wonderful things. Now, everyone, I had mentioned to you, remember, we've got a zigzag stitch like this, right? So if I want to follow this line, guess what? I have to turn my fabric so the zigzag is following the dash. Okay, so zigzag is following the dash, and I know you want to see it in already started, but the other piece to that puzzle is I'm going to continue to follow the dash in that direction. And I'm not going to turn this until I finish an area. That's going to be key to making it look right. So here we go. Finally, I've got my presser foot down. I've got this started. I'm going to take a couple little stitches to begin with, like that. All right, so I've got a couple stitches, and then I'm going to trim.
Someone asked what weight of thread on top.
Great question. It is a 40 weight thread on top, 40 weight thread. So let's see if I can get this and keep my hands out of the way for you. And usually about a 60 weight thread in the bottom. Okay, so 40 weight on top, 60 in bottom. Okay, so here we go. And I want to make sure, it always works this way when you're on live. I think I unthreaded my machine. You probably couldn't hear that because all of these great things are, they have sound canceling. But I heard my machine was making kind of a funny noise. So my thread actually had come out of the take-up lever. So because it came out of the take-up lever, I was going to have a really nasty mess underneath. So try to be prepared, and It never works out right. Okay, so let's try this again. And I know my hands are right in the way for this.
Oh, you're
guys.
fine.
Get that needle threaded.
Slaine said you were doing just fine with people watching.
I appreciate that. I really do.
This kind of stuff will happen at home, so it's good for them to see how to troubleshoot.
Yeah, it definitely is better that way. Okay, so now my thread's in the tape.
Someone asked if the finished piece is double-sided or single-sided.
The finished piece is actually single-sided. And so here we go. Oh, that sounds so much better.
Yes.
Sounds so much better. The finished piece is single-sided. What I did is I just finished it, made it into like a little quilt wall hanging is what I ended up doing. Okay, so here we go. So now, this is where with thread painting, you get in a groove. And I kind of notice how I'm not turning my hoop at all. Super important. And then I just fill in the area. And once I get it filled in there, okay, once I get that filled in, and I'm going to bring my needle up. I can now kind of move and notice how I'm turning to now go on this line. So it wasn't, and now make sure you put your presser foot down.
It's fun to watch, but it makes me want to do this so bad. I want to turn.
Yeah, it is very cool.
It's like coloring in the lines with
is,
stitches.
Very much so. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring up my presser foot and just pull this out a moment so you guys can see a little bit about what was going on with it.
Someone said, "Oh, Sonny, you make it look so easy."
And so this is what I was talking, Bethany and I were talking this morning. I wanted you to see this here, and then I'm going to come on to this next little piece over here. But remember what I just said about my mom having me do this when I was very, very young? Guess what? I heard someone, and I'm going to go ahead and I think you can probably hear me.
Yes.
Over the machine. But I read something the other day that basically says an expert is someone who knows how to do something very well. But often we don't become experts at anything because we give up too quickly. And I thought that was really interesting. And so basically what I want you to do is I'm just gonna, so see, I'm just filling in.
Someone asked, how many times do you normally go over the same section?
Great question. So, so what I want you to make sure you all do is you practice this. Because if you don't practice and try and test and do different things like this, you're never going to get really great at this. The question came up about how many times do I go over something? Well, obviously, I guess it's not obvious. I want to fill it in, but I kind of missed a little bit on the outside edge. So I'm going to come up and you can continue to go over. You'll start to hear things. Honestly, I start to hear thread popping. You'll start to hear your fabric pop. And that means there's probably a little too much. You're going over the same space too many times. So kind of be aware. When you practice and you try this, take my word for it. You're going to learn very quickly where that popping is. Now I'm changing the color real quick.
Someone
Sonny,
asked,
while you're doing that, did you have to make any bobbin tension adjustments?
I was just about to ask.
Another
Good one.
great question. question was about bobbin tension adjustments, and I did not. And really, what you're gonna see, and I am gonna go ahead and take this out for just a moment, so you can kind of see the bottom as well. I'm gonna zoom out slightly because I think it's a little bit easier to see. You can see the top slightly coming down. So I did not make any bobbin adjustments. I rarely do that. What you want is you want your top threads to be pulled to the back just slightly. And then you're going to, basically, I would always change my top tension versus my bobbin tension.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't really mess around with that bobbin tension much. So great question, really great question. And so let's get this guy back under. And I changed to a little bit darker color of thread, but I wanted to do that. And so let's zoom back in. I'm trying to limit my zooming speed so I don't make you guys woozy. But here's something else that's really cool you can do. Okay, so I'm going to taking my stitch width slightly smaller. Okay, and I take that thread. And now I didn't fill in the bottom area too much because I knew I was going to come back in with another color of thread. And here I'm going to actually turn here. Turn a little bit more to follow along in my lines. All right. So kind of like on the white with black flowered dress. Can you all see how I just added more color in there too, which is actually really cool. Now I'm not so worried about this down here. Because guess what, guys? I'm going to come back in and cover it up with a different color. So that's the beauty of FreeMotion. So I've got some great color like that. And it really is really fun to try and do all this stuff. And I'm going to put that down. And let's zoom out a minute. Oh, I'm so sorry, everyone. Because I want to share with you another sample that we had here at the office. Check out these flowers. Aren't they just absolutely wonderful? These are also FreeMotion using 3 different colors in that flower. And again, just starting with the dark, adding the light, and then going to the white in the center. So it just keeps building. Isn't that just cool? So lots of options for FreeMotion, as well as, again, the dress behind, which is really cool. And I'm gonna scoot back just a minute. And Bethany, we'll see if we may have to go to the other camera for this one, because I want you all to see, what do you think of this pillow, right? This flower is really cool. So I want you to see how great that is. But now let's go back to the other one, because this is all, we're kind of getting ready to go to our next step. Is if you look here, all of these flowers, all this stuff here is done with a straight stitch versus a zigzag stitch. So 2 options, right? So what this is doing is all these are is little applique pieces of fabric, and then it's stitched down by FreeMotion. Isn't that cool? I just think so. What I'm hoping is not only are you getting excited that you can, like anyone can do this, we're going to practice, right? So you're going to become an expert by practicing, but you can do zigzag, you can do straight stitch, you can do so many different things with FreeMotion sewing. So before I move on to our next step, are there any other questions? If you have questions about the thread painting, everyone, couple things. I threw my little piece down.
Someone asked about, I mean, we answered it in the chat, but I think it's worth mentioning.
Yeah.
Does the bobbin thread have to match the top thread?
Great question. So the question about the bobbin thread matching the top thread, I usually don't unless, so the person who asked earlier was basically what I did reversible. If it's gonna be reversible, then yes, you wanna match your top and bobbin thread. But like for me, I've just made it into a little wall hanging, right? So I've got a little wall hanging. I was never gonna see the back. So I kept the bobbin thread like a lightweight or a lightweight white bobbin thread. Will make it look nice. So again, the one thing to remember, those little hashtags in there are important. That's what gives you the movement, the motion. And so follow those, determine that before you get started. You know, I made those little marks so I could go, oh, okay, I want this one to go this way and I want this one to go the other way. So it's actually pretty easy that way. All right, other questions? Are you guys excited about the thread painting? I hope so, because it is something that if you are working with thread painting like that, it's really quite forgiving. And that's why I wanted to start with it, is it's really quite a forgiving technique. You can go over stuff several times, you can go back, you can make something a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller than your markings. It's not that critical, but you just get that motion. You saw how I just kind of got in a groove. And you don't want to go super slow. You don't want to go super fast. You want to just kind of, you get in that groove and you just kind of move stuff around. So
everybody is saying that they're really excited about this technique. Some have never seen this before, so it's all new. And they're excited to be playing with this this new idea.
that's great. And it's so the other thing with thread painting, I think that's really neat, is it is very you can express yourself. You know, I found inspiration from my grandmother's little table runner piece, but you can find you know, anywhere, everywhere, flowers, whatever, pictures, photos, so much going on with that. Now, as we were just talking there, I actually did change to a regular, basically it's a polyester thread, because now what we're going to do is we're going to go into some quilting techniques that are also free motion. So we're shifting. Remember, I kind of mentioned, I keep throwing things on the floor, but I mentioned about this guy, right? It was all straight stitching. So with straight stitching, everyone, that is going to be, again, free motion. Your stitch length doesn't matter on your machine. Your stitch length doesn't matter. I'm going to say that again, because you're moving the fabric. So how the stitch length works is just however fast or slow you move the fabric. Does that make, I know that makes sense to you all. So we're going to do a little bit of free motion stippling now. And what stippling is if I'm going to use this is a little Dresden plate placemat that I made. And can you all see that fun little, all the squiggly lines here? That is stippling. And if you stipple, there's micro stippling super close together. There's large stippling that is a lot further apart. That is what stippling actually is. I know it's really kind of hard to see, and we'll see if we can get a better camera angle here in a little bit. But behind me, do you all see this beautiful quilt? I did not do that. I wish I could take credit, but it is all free motion stipple, and it is just beautiful. So again, it's practice, everyone. So it is practice. So we're going to start. And what I did is I just made myself a little 4 square block. And this is what I would suggest. I just use fabric from my stash, right? So I use fabric from my stash. And I just made 4 little blocks. One block I'm going to stipple. One piece I want to share with you a little bit that's really kind of cool is going just around your actual fabric itself, which is really fun. And then we're going to do a little bit of a template. Okay, so that's our next step. So, all right. So Bethany, if we can go to the other
I get you.
camera. Yes, you do. I appreciate that. What I want to do, let's zoom in. Here is something that I think is super important, and I'm going to turn this just a little bit easier for me and easier for you to see. I'm going to take out my safety pin. With FreeMotion stippling or any sort of quilting, everyone, it is really very important that you actually start in the center of your block and work out. So that's important. So we're going to start kind of down here in the center and work my way out. And then the other thing that is important is you got to think a little bit about where you're going. See if I can do this properly this time, because I want to zoom out. I want to fill in this whole block. So if I go from here to here, if I just zoom across one of these areas, what's going to happen is I'm going to be empty here. So you kind of have to think, I'm going to start here and I'm going to kind of move around over to here. And then I'm going to kind of move around a little bit. So how to think just a little bit on how this is going to work for you. And let's zoom in. Again, trying not to, I've made you woozy enough with my zoom in and zoom out. So we're going to start down in here. But there is something that I like to do and that I think most quilters would say is kind of important. Got my presser foot down. I've gone to a straight stitch. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take just one little stitch, and I took one stitch, and now I've got my bobbin thread on the top, because that's what, as a quilter, you don't want that bobbin thread underneath. So then I'm just going to go back and forth a couple times, and I'm going to clip my thread super close. Do any of you ever lose your scissors at home? That's what just happened to me. You couldn't see it. So I'm going to clip that super close. So it's secure now by going back and forth a couple times. And now again, just get started. And what I want you to notice here is I'm just kind of making loops. And then I'm going to come all the way back down. All the way into this area. I can make a big loop and I can make a little loop. Can you see what's going on? Isn't that like the coolest thing? I think it's so really neat. Basically, I've had teachers tell me that do this for a living, that do, you know, lots of quilting, is they're like, make C's and J's. So make a little C and make a little J, make a little C and make a little J. And now, you notice how I've got, again, that little rhythm going. You can kind of see I've got a rhythm going. The speed of your machine and how fast I move the fabric has to move together. This is probably, for most quilters, a little too long of a stitch. So I'm either don't have my speed fast enough, or I don't have my, or I'm moving too quick. So one of two.
So I'm glad you bring this up, because we had a couple questions. What should your stitch width be? But we're using a straight stitch. So your stitch length is determined based on how fast you're moving the fabric, as well as how fast you're sewing as well.
Correct. So the speed of my machine. So this machine is perfect for this, because this little heavy duty. I'm going to zoom out.
And the other question is, do you cross lines or make points? So that will be the answer next.
Yeah. So I do have a speed control on my heavy duty here, which I love. So I can kind of, I put it toward the higher end. So I can put my pedal to the metal, basically have my foot all the way down, and it's not gonna be too fast for me. So so notice how I'm moving my fabric quicker or slower depending upon the speed of my machine. So that's really important. So you could see how I was moving it. I know but that has to do a little bit with, again, the ability to have that speed control, which is really, really great. Now, the other question was about, let's see here, let's get in close here. The other question, I think it was about points, right?
Points and crossing over
Okay, so
those techniques.
for real stippling, you should not cross over. Okay, so for what is officially stippling, you shouldn't cross over. There is no stipple police. There are no stipple police, I should say. So because of that, if you cross over, it's not going to hurt anything while you're practicing. But the goal is, if you look here, is to not cross over your lines for stippling. That's the goal in this particular style. Okay, so in this particular style. As far as points go, certainly you can, once you get really good at this. So I'm going to come down here. If you want to make a point, you certainly can, right? So if I want to come back and I want to come back and make another point, depending upon what you're doing, that look can be really cool. And so I'm going to turn this a little bit normally, but you can see I just made some points. So it's really, really cool depending upon what you're making, right? So that's also very interesting for that. I think that's a great question. And so points depends on what you're doing. You shouldn't really cross over a line, but again, as you practice and you try different techniques, and again, as Bethany and I were talking earlier as we were getting set up, there are some techniques. So there are some techniques that do allow you to cross over, and one of them is what is called pebbles. So pebbles is making circles like this. And then you're going to come here and you're going to make another circle. You're going to come in. So once you get done with your pebbles, notice how I'm not really. This one obviously is taking me higher concentration because I'm being really quiet when we're doing this one. But so for this technique, if I bring my needle up, you can see here how I'm just going to make a bed of pebbles. So that's a technique where certainly you cross over. So there are lots of different options for you on what you want to do. But again, guys, it's all about practicing.
Kathy says, is this how you'd sew on script wording, or is there a better way?
Certainly you could, there are a couple things with script, right? So if we can go to the other, yeah. A couple things with the script is it depends on how dense you want your lettering. So Bethany, I know you played with another video that we did, and like signing your name. If you want to sign your name with that zigzag stitch, it looks more like calligraphy. If you want to use the straight stitch like this, you can do that as well and just basically sign your name. That's often one of the easiest things to learn to do when you're doing things like this, is to sign your name because you're so used to it. Okay, so great question, everybody. Great question.
I think the best tip that Sonny gave me when she first taught me how to do free motion sewing was to breathe, because she saw me holding my breath. So when you first start doing it, you don't even realize you're holding your breath.
That's true. Yeah.
And I get done and she's like, okay, and breathe.
Yeah,
and
now breathe.
Oh, I didn't even realize I had
Yeah.
stopped breathing.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people do that. So that is really key. So breathing is important for all of us, right? Breathing
Someone
is
wants to
important.
know what your machine settings are, even though we talked about width and length.
Yep, so for my straight stitch, my machine setting is just straight stitch, which is stitch number 1. My stitch width is basically center needle. On the heavy duty, it defaults to 3.5, so that's the middle. That's just the center needle straight stitch. And if we can flip to the other camera, so that's your center needle straight stitch as we work with that. The stitch length itself is 2.5. But again, it doesn't matter what that stitch length is because I'm the one moving it, but it's just the default straight stitch. Okay, so default straight stitch. Now, I do want to now show you something else that I think is really fun to do. And if stippling, so if this is a little, if you think that that's too much for you, right? It's just, you don't know where to go, what to do. Another fun thing to do with straight stitch is, see this great leaf? What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to use the leaf as my guide. I'm going to use the leaf as my guide. Same thing though at the beginning. I'm going to take one stitch and I'm going to pull up that bobbin thread. That's it. Again, it's just going to hold this together. So then I'm going to just take a couple of stitches. Make sure I have that presser put down, which I didn't, so we'll see how that goes. And then all I'm going to do is follow my lead. I really didn't follow very well, but that's okay.
So someone asked earlier what it would look like FreeMotion sewing over a patterned fabric, and this is exactly what she's doing, is highlighting this leaf and giving it more attention in the print, you know, by stitching over it. So I think this is a fun way to highlight maybe your favorite part of a design on a fabric that you want to showcase.
Yep, this is, and then again, you don't have to be super precise. Notice I'm going this time again, for those who are asking, I am going over this a couple different times to make it stand out. So up. And then can you all see that? So now look at how cool that is. So this is a really fun way. So I use red on gray, and then I would use gray on the red up here. So you can get some really, really neat effects by doing this. And I could go in and do lines, do anything like that. But again, for those of you who are new, maybe to FreeMotion, this is a great way to practice. Find some fabric that you like, practice, try different things with this. It's really fun. You know, I could come in here. Let's just do one more little.
Someone had a question about why you pull the bobbin thread through and clip it, and we have about 10 minutes left.
Yeah. All right. So I should have done it there. The reason why I pull up that bobbin thread is that not only secures it, but it makes the back look prettier. And so the thing with quilters, and if you think about the quilts that you have, right? Again, this is one of those, I can't talk and do at the same time. Yes.
Well, then I'll ask you another question that someone had. Do you use a seam ripper for areas you want to redo? Like for the zigzag coloring part, can you only pick out a single thread, or do you need to take out the entire area if you want to make changes? What would your recommendation be there if someone wanted to redo an area? Because there's so many stitches in one area.
So I just thought I was having fun here.
It's fun to watch.
I was having fun. That was just really cool. And it was calling for a little extra in there, right? The question was, you know, again, so as a, if you think about the quilts you have, I'm going to go back to that. If you think about the quilts you have, you want to make sure that, you know, you don't have a lot of threads on the bottom. And so get there, right there. So that's why I like to bring the thread up, and you can actually do that at the end as well. So it'll be cleaner on the back. And so that is, I didn't want to miss that one for you. Now, What was the last one, Bethany? I'm
I'll
sorry.
switch to the main camera.
Yeah. what was the last
It was
question?
about like if someone wanted to redo an area that
yeah,
they've stitched
sorry.
over and the best
Yeah.
way to remove those stitches, especially for painting.
The trick is because it's all one area and one set of stitches, if you take out just a couple, you might be taking out more than what you're expecting. What I would do is I would be really careful, and I would, like, if you pick out a couple areas or a couple little bits, then I would actually tie those threads. Basically take your thread from the top to the back and do a little tie. So you're not going to lose the whole thing, because it could be very much that if you take out something, it's going to affect the whole piece. So I think that's important. That's a great question. Really, really good question.
All right. Back on the machine. We got about
All right.
8 more minutes.
Okay, so the last thing that I want to share with you, I'm going to talk with you a moment about templates, especially for quilting. It doesn't have to be for quilting, but there are, if you feel more comfortable, I was saying earlier that I kind of felt like we may have to go to the other,
Okay.
yeah, the big camera. What I was saying earlier is sometimes I get all caught up. This is a quilt that I have done. Thank you, Bethany. It was just a little, there we go. Just a little quilt here. It's not, we are going to have problems showing this on camera, I think. But what I want you to really look at is right in here. Can you see that? Thank you so much.
I'll be your Vanna White.
There
today.
we go. All right.
So
That's
in
that's
here.
plain, but it's
Yeah.
it's within the sashing. So
there
Got
we
it?
go. Yeah,
Got
that's it.
okay.
So right in this area.
Okay, so those were pieces, thanks, that I drew, and I came up with a little template. So I drew a little template and drew that on that sashing area. It is a very traditional pumpkin seed. You can find these different places, right? So different templates, but you can find them different places. I struggle with templates, and the reason why I struggle with templates is because I never follow the lines. So that's why I like stippling, is I can do whatever, whenever, however. But if you are someone, so let's go back to the,
Okay.
thank you for helping me
You're
so
welcome.
much today, Bethany. This is a little template that I found that I thought looked really nice. It was just kind of interesting. I drew it on with, this is a wash away marker. We have Singer Michaels carries the wash away markers, so that's really nice. You can look those up. There are also fadeaways, but fadeaways fade away within about an hour or so. And I needed this for a longer period of time. When you're working with templates, you are following lines, which I just admitted to you I don't do very well. But what I am going to explain and try to do a little bit better for us today is I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. And when I zoom in, I'm not going to do a lot of this, but one of the tricks is we're not going to basically pick up our pen. If you think about coloring, we're not going to pick up our pen. We're not going to pick up our thread. What I will do is I'm just going to start here. And you guys know I like to, I'm going to bring that bottom thread up. You already know it just makes it a little bit cleaner behind. Take a couple stitches, and with a straight stitch now, I'm going to turn my fabric just a little bit because I do want to keep my fabric straight.
Mhm.
So now let's try and see how I do with following lines today. I am going to come up all the way to the top. Oh, I'm doing really bad following lines today. Then I'm going to come back down. And sometimes if you go faster, it's easier to follow the lines. Except for me. See, this is why I'm a stippler.
Someone asked if you ever use gloves for free motion to have more control.
Yes, actually, gloves work really great. There are special, for those of you who maybe don't know, there are special gloves that help to move your fabric in a better way, especially when you're doing free motion quilting like this on a template.
It can also help to have an extension table to have a bigger sewing space.
And the heavy duty machines that I'm working on definitely definitely have some really great, so I'm going to be a little embarrassed to show you all this, but I'm going to show you this nonetheless. Is you can see how I really got off the line right there, but I came back strong on this side. So that's where it's also a little bit easier, obviously, if you are have a little bit more space and that sort of thing.
And the beauty, Sonny, is that the line goes away because it's
Yeah,
exactly.
so when the line disappears, nobody really knows how far off the line you were.
that's true. I don't know if you all heard Vanessa. She was giving me encouragement because eventually the line washes away or it disappears. So there's no questions, right? So that is really great. So everyone, I hope you all enjoyed today. And I just want to remind you again, drop your feed teeth, get that darning foot, and then hoop your fabric if you're doing that free motion thread painting. I think that's really important. And also practice and breathe, as Bethany said, breathe, but definitely practice, because again, you can't be an expert if you give up too soon. So definitely practice, become that expert, practice, 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 get good at what you love. And whether it's the painting, the stippling, or, using templates. So are there any other questions, everyone?
Nope, just everybody saying thank you, fabulous class, enjoyed your style, have to give this a try.
Yeah, please go out and have some fun. And again, if you have any questions, you can certainly, can still put that in the chat for a moment, but this is recorded. So remember, it's on Michael's YouTube channel. You can always go back and look at it again. And if you are if you're in need of a great new machine, the Singer Heavy Duties are wonderful. The computerized one I'm using today is great. So those, Michael's has them. You can go ahead and get those, as well as a lot of the other links that were put in the chat. So everyone, have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining, and have fun with some thread painting.